He told me I was going to waste the money anyway. 42 days later, I signed the papers that made me my son's landlord. You're going to waste this money anyway, my son said, not even waiting for the tea to steep. Dad would have wanted it to go to the family. To me. He leaned on the counter like he'd helped build it, though the only thing he'd built at 38 was a list of excuses and half-completed online courses. Brett had his father's dark hair and big hands, but none of his patience. He wore expensive sneakers he didn't pay for and a smirk he couldn't afford. The family is me, I said. I was Dad's family, too. He laughed. You'll blow it on porch swans and travel shows. You're bored, Mom. I'll invest it. Kylie and I have ideas. Real plans. From the living room, my 8-year-old grandson, Avery, shouted at his animated show to look out for a falling piano. In the hallway mirror, I saw Kylie's face as she pretended not to watch us. She had that permanent gloss some people get from always looking at themselves on front-facing cameras. Babe, she said to my son, be gentle. She's grieving. I am grieving, I said. And I'm not stupid. The probate lawyer said. The lawyer read the will, I said, and topped off my tea. Your father left everything to me. He told you why. He hoped you'd stand on your own 2 feet. He hoped I'd have tools, Brett said, stabbing the air with his finger. You're hoarding the toolbox. Then build something without mine. He said it again, the line that would sew itself into the back of my eyelids for weeks. You're going to waste this money anyway. Kylie stepped in, her perfume a lemony insistence. We could take over the house, Lorna. You could downsize to a cute senior apartment. There's a shuttle to the grocery store. Your shows. Bingo. New friends your age. New friends, I said, and smiled, because if I didn't I might have reached for the rolling pin, and I prefer my revenge without dents. After they left in a gust of cologne, complaints, and half a bag of my cookies, I sat in Amos's chair with the paperwork he'd left me. He had not been rich by anyone's magazine standards. He'd been a machinist with a habit of buying one more used tool than necessary and a savings account quiet as a beehive. We'd paid off the house. We'd put something aside every month. We'd kept our old car purring because Amos said dignity often sounds like a well-maintained engine. When his lungs failed him, I watched the numbers in our account convert into his breathing, appointment by appointment. After he was gone, the remainder sold investments, the value of a tiny property he'd bought long ago, life insurance, and a stack of war bonds his mother had tucked away, wasn't obscene, but it was enough to matter. There are many ways to waste money. You can waste it on shiny things that make your life look like a brochure for a life you don't have. You can waste it on making people love you who never will. Or you can waste it on mercy, which is the only kind of waste I've ever found satisfying. I decided to waste the money so publicly that even my son might learn something. First, I called our lawyer, a kind-eyed woman who wore boots like she had places to go and didn't mind mud. I want 3 documents, I told her. A living trust, a letter of intent, and a conditional gift that will make someone curse my name kindly for years. Those are my favorite kind of curses, she said. Put half of what Amos left into a trust for Avery. Education. Health. If Brett gets his life together, sober, steady job for a year, counseling, community service, I want him to receive a stipend large enough to remove his excuses, but small enough to keep him industrious. And the other half? She asked. I have some ideas, I said, and heard Amos laugh in my head like a turned screw finally coming loose. There's a thrift store in our town called Second Chances that smells like old books and lemon oil. Behind it is a little lot I'd always thought was wasted, nothing but gravel and a rusted fence. I walked into their office 2 days after Brett's prediction and set my purse on the desk. How much would it cost to turn that back lot into a workshop? I asked the manager. For teens. For anyone who needs to learn how to fix a toaster or a bicycle or their pride. He looked at me the way people look at you when they mistake private grief for public kindness. Mrs. Harrow, we've dreamed about that for years. I prefer to waste money, I said, and smiled. Let's waste it well. They cried. I didn't. I'd spent my tears already in the worst kind of thrift. By the end of the week, I'd bought the lot. By the end of the month, permits were filed and a sign hung crookedly, deliberately, I insisted, over the chain-link fence, The Amos Harrow Shop, where we fix things. YouTube likes stories with little turns of fate and clean signage. I gave them both. Content, Kylie said when she saw the video the thrift store posted of me cutting a ribbon with a pair of bolt cutters. You're a meme now, Lorna. She's wasting money, Brett said, scanning comments for any mention of him. He found none. Greed is a search bar that always returns the same result. Then the letters started. The first was from a boy named Javian whose bike we repaired. He'd been riding 3 buses to school because a strip of rubber had stood between him and algebra. He wrote his thanks on loose-leaf paper with a pen that skipped, then brought the letter in person because he thought stamps were for old people and taxes. He hugged me fast and hard, like courage checking itself to be sure it still fit. Other letters came, handwritten, typed, folded in precise quarters, smeared with a thumbprint of engine grease. We framed them and hung them crooked, too. I wanted anyone who walked in to see the tilt that Amos loved, the idea that perfection is the most boring thing we can aim for. People whispered. People shouted. People posted. There were those who called me a saint, I'm not, and those who called me a fool, closer. I saved screenshots of the latter for an essay I'll never publish called How I Learned to Enjoy Being Underestimated. And then there was the envelope with my name spelled wrong. Lornal, it said. The handwriting was familiar. And it was a contract written by a man who'd been introduced to the word leverage in a podcast. Kylie's cousin is starting a brand, Brett explained over dinner he hadn't paid for. He just needs seed. Imagine Dad's name on something that scales. The Amos Legacy Fund. We'll flip houses. We'll flip the street. We'll disrupt flipping. We are not a spatula, I said. We are a family. But it's win-win, he said. You invest, we pay you back with returns. 2 years, maybe 3. We'll take meetings. I'll hire a coach. I'll get a tattoo that reminds me to hustle. I need a runway. Take the bus, I said. It stops at the end of your driveway. Kylie put her wine glass down with the kind of deliberation people reserve for threats dressed as etiquette. We're trying to help you, Lorna. I know, I said. But I'm saving my money for waste. They stopped speaking to me for 11 days. Silence in our house is usually a nap. This time it was a strategy. On day 12, I woke to a tapping on my front window. Avery stood on the porch with his backpack and a note from his father. Field trip. Emergency. Can you take him? Of course I could. Of course I did. I made him pancakes with chocolate chips arranged like bear faces, and we practiced whistling through our teeth. He told me about volcanoes and a kid named Parker who said you can't be a ninja if you wear Velcro shoes. We agreed Parker was probably wrong about most things. At 2:07 p.m., my landline rang. It was my bank. Mrs. Harrow, this is about a wire transfer request for $75,000. From whom? I asked, though in my bones I already knew. From your son. He doesn't have access to my account, I said. He tried to, the woman said gently. We needed your confirmation. Thank you, I said, and when I hung up, I stood very still in the kitchen until the world returned to its proper size. At 3:01 p.m., Brett knocked. He didn't look ashamed. Shame is a muscle that atrophies when you never use it. He looked inconvenienced. They said no because you don't answer your phone, he said. I'm answering it now, I said, and poured him a glass of water. Water is honest. It never pretends to be anything else. Mom, he said, too loudly. Why are you making this so hard? Brett, baby, I said, and felt my voice go soft in the old shape it used to take when he was 4 and convinced monsters lived under his bed. Because hard is the only thing that helps you grow. He rolled his eyes. Don't talk to me like I'm a kid. Stop acting like one. Kylie slunk in behind him like a shadow with highlights. This is financial abuse, she said, the phrase holding the glassy excitement new words have when you first learn them. Withholding generational wealth from your only son who is a member of a historically underemployed demographic. Kylie, I said. You sell skincare out of your trunk. It's a startup, she said primly. Then start it up without my gasoline. She made a noise like a tea kettle herself and grabbed Brett's arm. Let's go. She wants to die surrounded by her little crooked frames. It should have hurt more than it did. I was busy. There is a small bank in our town with wood counters that remind me of libraries, and a loan officer named Margie who types like she's playing a piano she loves. I sat with her and we drank coffee that had given up sometime around 9 a.m. I want to buy a house, I said. You already have one, she said. I want to buy another, I said. Preferably one with a blue door and a lawn that dreams of being a field. She laughed. You're in luck. She slid a listing across the counter. The address made my heart do the small jump that means a plan has announced itself in your bones. It was the 3-bedroom rental Brett and Kylie lived in. Owned by a man named Randall whose idea of landlordship involved ignoring leaks until they formed their own union. He's desperate, she said. Divorce. Tax stuff. He wants out. How poetic, I said. There are rules in our state about purchasing a property whose tenants you know. There are rules about evicting and renovating and rent. There are rules about offering people first right of refusal. I kept every rule, down to the last form initialed, until my pen got a callus. When the papers were ready, I wore my church dress because it makes me feel like I could say no to an angel if I needed to. On the 42nd day after Brett called me a waste bin with a pulse, I signed. I owned my son's house with the blue door and the lawn that dreamed big. The lawyer slid copies into a folder, and I slid that folder into my purse. Outside the window, the first leaves were giving up and turning gold. I took that as permission. I didn't evict them. I'm not a monster. I raised one who behaves like one sometimes, but monsters prefer caves, and half the time my son prefers my kitchen. I sent them a letter, formal, polite, printed on paper with the watermark I chose because it looked like sunlight on a lake. Dear tenants, it began. Because formality is a leash, this letter is to inform you that the property at 186 Wren Street has been sold. Your lease will continue under the same terms through its current end date in March. Any questions can be directed to the management company listed below. Please note the enclosed schedule of maintenance and improvements. It's time your home stopped pretending to be a sieve. I enclosed a card with the logo for Harrow Management, 2 crooked wrenches crossed like a heraldry joke Amos would have loved. The phone exploded while I was slicing onions for soup. What did you do? Brett shouted. You bought my house? It's not your house, I said. It's a house you rent. And it has a roof that will not survive the rainy season. I have sent a roofer and someone to look at the electrical. We don't need a roof. Everyone needs a roof, Brett, I said, especially the people who don't realize it yet. Kylie grabbed the line like a referee nobody asked for. This is a control thing, isn't it? You can't own us, Lorna. I don't want to own you, I said. I want to own the gutter that's about to fall off and kill your tulips. Please move your potted plants from the back steps by Thursday. I'm not moving anything, she said. They will crack if the ladder hits them, I said. Consider the tulips. She hung up. I set the spoon down and laughed, because Amos would have wheezed with the kind of laughter that made him cough. When the roofer arrived, Brett stood in the yard with his arms crossed and refused to help move the barbecue. The roofer was a patient man with 4 arms that told the story of his life more truthfully than his words did. He moved the barbecue himself and then called me with a sigh. Ma'am, your tenant is spirited. He's my son, I said. It's a condition. While the house on Wren got a roof and gutters and wiring that won't set a sheet on fire, I visited the Amos Harrow shop every afternoon at 4. I learned to true a wheel and the satisfaction of cloth buffed against chrome. I kept a small ledger of every dollar I spent and every story someone told me as they waited for their number to be called. I wrote down the stories because money is loud, but stories carry further. A woman named Charisse brought in a toaster with a cord that looked like it had lost a knife fight. She said she needed it because her son liked Pop-Tarts before school, and for 3 weeks he'd gone without because money this month went to shoes and gas and 1 rogue field trip fee. A boy named Miguel learned to sharpen lawnmower blades and then sharpened his own sense of purpose. A retired teacher named Carol watched a girl solder a joint and cried in a way that told me she had missed being useful more than she could say. I wasted money on new tool benches and a coffee machine that did not laugh at decaf drinkers. I wasted money on a minivan with seats that flip in ways I don't fully understand so we could pick up kids whose parents work 2 jobs and council meetings no longer pretend to notice them. I wasted money on pizza nights and a bulletin board of handwritten job postings and a lockbox for people to leave notes they were afraid to say out loud. And then I wasted money on a lawyer again. Guardianship, she asked, eyebrows raised, pen poised. No, I said. I want the opposite. I want the certainty that no one can attempt to take mine. She understood. She had seen the emails from Kylie to Brett's friend who had an uncle in real estate who knew a notary who knew a guy. Can we force her to sell? She's old. She once forgot the word for spatula. There's a form, right? Kylie loves forms the way hyenas love bones. We filed the papers that said I was in charge of me. We filed a letter that spelled out what would happen if I became forgetful. A board of 3, my sister, the pastor known for kindness rather than sermons, and the lawyer with muddy boots, would decide the how and the who. Not Brett. Not Kylie. They would be given the right to visit and the job of listening. My grandson turned 9, and I gave him a toolbox with his name burned into the handle. He gave me a drawing of me with very long legs and a cape made of cookies. You're super gran, he said, and I kissed his head and said, that's the only return on investment I need. The week their roof finished, Brett and Kylie hosted a party. They didn't invite me. That was fine. I could hear it from my porch anyway, the thud of a bass line that believes it invented heartbeat, the laughter of adults who don't pay for their own ice. At 10, the police came and told them to turn it down. At midnight, the police came again. I went to bed. In the morning, the grass was a bruise and someone had left a red cup in my mailbox. At 9 a.m., the property manager emailed them a friendly reminder about noise and the clause in their lease. At 9:05, my phone rang. You're harassing us, Brett said. I'm protecting your deposit, I said. We don't have one, he said triumphantly, and then realized what he'd revealed. You will, I said. When your lease renews, there will be a deposit. Consider it a savings plan for people who leave red cups where mail should go. I heard Kylie in the background, hissing, stop calling her. She loves it. She wasn't wrong. The shop kept filling. A local news station did a story on us, and my hair looked like a tumbleweed and I didn't care. Donations poured in. Tools from men who said, I was saving these for my grandson, but he loves screens more than screws. Money from women who said, I've never held a wrench, but I can hold up this place for a month. Cookies from grandmothers who also secreted recipes like maps in their aprons. The city invited me to a council meeting to receive a certificate printed on thick stock. They gave me a microphone and I gave them a sentence. Fixing is how love looks when it shows up in work clothes. Later, the mayor asked if I'd consider joining a task force. I said only if I can skip meetings that pretend to be helpful. He laughed and said, so, none of them. I told him to send agendas. I'd circle the ones worth my lipstick. Kylie texted me out of nowhere one afternoon. We're late on rent. Can you spot us? I read it twice, then sent back 4 words. You can once you. What followed was a poem lacking rhyme or grace. Kylie asked. I declined. Brett demanded. I refused. He tried to shame me. It bounced off. She told me I was heartless. I looked at my crooked wall of letters and patted my chest to see if a heart was still there. It was beating steady as a metronome for someone else's song. In March, their lease expired. I offered a renewal at market rate minus 10% because I am not trying to bankrupt the people who will babysit me when I'm old. The new lease came with a deposit and a rule about parties and a clause about how I needed 24 hours notice to drop by unless I was delivering cookies, which could be done without fanfare. I put that one in mostly to amuse myself. They said they'd think about it. Then I learned they hadn't paid March rent at all. My management company started the process you must start when adults behave like toddlers with more rights. I'll pay you with interest, Brett said, frantic on the phone. I swear. Just float me this once. You've been floating for 10 years, I said softly. People drown from floating too long, baby. They forget what kicking feels like. Kylie called her mother, who called me. Do you want to see your grandson live under a bridge? She asked. Do you want his school to know you're throwing him out? My grandson is welcome in my home, I said. If he lives under a bridge, that is the fault of 2 adults who chose not to pay for shelter in order to buy sneakers that do not make them faster. Silence. Then, you're cruel. I'm tired, I said, and hung up. I would have thrown the book at a stranger less than I did my son, because love is heavier than paperbacks. We went to mediation because I insisted, and there in a room that smelled like coffee and defeat we signed an agreement. Pay what you owe by the 15th. If not, vacate by the end of the month. Let the child spend 3 afternoons a week at my house. Meet with a counselor who says hard things in a soft voice. Show proof of job applications that match your skills rather than your fantasies. They paid. Barely. Late. With money borrowed from friends who expect to be paid in gossip. They moved anyway, to a smaller place across town with an HOA that enforces rules like it's the only sport they know. I rented the rent house to a nurse and her wife who brew coffee that smells like farm mornings and bring me loaves of bread so beautiful I feel bad slicing them. There is a kind of revenge that looks like you holding the door open for the life you always wanted and letting it walk right past the person who told you didn't deserve it. You're going to die alone, Kylie texted once at 1:14 a.m. Maybe I typed, then deleted it. I don't owe anyone the shape of my private fears. Instead, I wrote, we are hosting a free tax prep clinic at the shop on Saturday. Please send anyone who needs help. She did not reply. Later, I saw her in line. She wore sunglasses. When tax season ended, we hung a new sign, summer apprenticeships, stipends available. We asked businesses to take a kid for 6 weeks and teach them something you can't learn from YouTube. The bakery took a girl who hadn't smiled in public since her mother left. The body shop hired a boy with hands that taught themselves honesty. The city parks department took 2 teens and returned them with sunburns that looked like maps of the places they'd been needed. I wrote the stipend checks. I wrote them with Amos's pen, the one that left a little canyon in the page like it meant it. Money moved from my account to theirs and nothing about my life shrank. Everything got bigger. Brett got a job at a hardware store because irony is the language God uses when he's feeling playful. He lasted 4 days. They expect you to know things, he said, appalled. Like where bolts are. Like if someone says 1/4 you have to pretend you speak math. They expect you to learn the aisles, I said. Like everyone else. They gave me a vest, he said, and touched it as if it had grown there. Then wear it, I said. He didn't. He posted motivational quotes on the internet about being an entrepreneur instead. I stopped clicking. Love can be the thing you feel and the boundary you keep. The will reading that should have happened months earlier when Amos died was simple. He'd done all the complex work before he left. The lawyer read the words I'd already read alone in my kitchen, words Amos wrote with a blunt pencil because he said real things deserved splinters. I leave my everything to you, Lore, he wrote, and that comma between Lore and I made me cry harder than any of the rest of it. You'll know what to do. You always have. It was after that meeting that I did the pettiest thing I've done in a decade, and it was also the most satisfying. I bought Brett's debt. He had 3 credit cards, a personal loan, and a slick-talking contract with a store that sells televisions larger than my first apartment. Debts get bundled and sold like children's trading cards. My lawyer and I sat with a man whose tie announced that he liked the word arbitrage and made a deal. A legal trick of the light turned what Brett owed into what he owed me. I could have hounded him. I could have crushed him under paper. Instead, I wrote him a letter with a payment plan that a human could keep. $25 a week. No interest as long as he paid. Miss 3 payments and interest kicks back in at a rate that would make a banker clutch his pearls. Every 6 on-time payments earned him a forgiveness coupon I signed like a schoolteacher. He could earn his way out and learn the shape of responsibility 1 square on a calendar at a time. He paid 2 months, then stopped. He texted me that something had come up. I texted back a photo of Avery and me eating popsicles on the porch. Same here, I wrote. My calendar is full of things I choose. He got angry, then quiet, which is worse. I did not chase him. I have a long list of things I chase. Adults who enjoy running from themselves are not on it. Kylie, ever the storm in search of a parade to ruin, found a different path. She posted a video about how older generations hoard resources to keep younger people struggling. She filmed it in their small kitchen with a plant dying behind her. Comments bloomed like mold, some in their favor, some reminding her that skincare should not be used as currency. I didn't answer. I bought that plant a friend at the nursery and left it on their doorstep with a note. It drinks more than you think. So do most living things. The day the shop turned one, we threw a party that would have made my shy, practical husband hide in the pantry and wait it out. We had a DJ named Uncle Dave who worked at the post office and put secret heart into every envelope he slid under a door. We had a banner that said thank you in letters children painted and a cake so big we cut it with a drywall saw clean, I promise. We had a stack of letters for anyone to read who needed proof that money can be wasted into miracles. Brett came. He stood at the edge like a deer learning a new language. I saw his hands flex in that old way, the way he does when he wants to take something so he won't have to feel the want. He didn't take anything. He watched a boy fix a vacuum with the calm of a surgeon. He watched a girl thread a needle with the steadiness of someone who has known earthquakes and still believes in houses. He came to me at last with his shoulders high and his mouth set. I braced for cruelty. Kylie's brand of revenge is always a preemptive strike, but his face wasn't mean. It was tired. I don't know how to be a person people count on, he said. I only know how to be the one who needs. You learned that somewhere, I said. And you can learn something else. It's too late, he said. You have a son, I said. So do I. It's never too late when the people who need you haven't given up. Have you? He asked, and the question sat between us, polite as a ghost. I gave up on your excuses, I said. Not on you. He nodded, and if life were a movie, a string section would have swelled. But it isn't. He left without hugging me. He took a flyer about apprenticeships. He didn't come back for a while. 2 months later, I rolled up to the lumber yard to buy plywood for a shelf, and there he was, arguing with a clipboard. He saw me and closed his eyes like he hoped I'd disappear. I'm learning to drive the forklift, he said when I didn't. They said I could get certified if I stopped trying to do donuts. That seems reasonable, I said. He gave me a crooked smile I recognized from kindergarten pictures. Mrs. Delgado is training me. She could peel paint with a look. Give her flowers, I said. Or donuts. He did. He texted me a photo of him and a forklift that leaned like it liked him. He sent me his first pay stub. He paid me $25. Then $25 more. Then $40 when he worked overtime. I wrote him the forgiveness coupons and tucked them into a drawer with recipes and grief and habits. Kylie did not like any of it. She came to my house like a hurricane in wedge sandals and told me this was my fault. He's gone all the time, she said. When he's home, he's tired. He smells like lumber. He smells like work, I said. It's not attractive, she said. It is to me. She flung her hand toward my wall of letters. This is your cult. This is my waste, I said. You're not required to approve. You think you're better than us because you have a trust and a shop and a management company and people who clap when you speak. I think I'm me, I said. Do you? She left. It started to rain as if the weather had been waiting for a cue. There is a part of this story I almost didn't tell because it sounds like a scene written for applause, and I am trying not to look at my life with a director's eye. But truth matters more than my embarrassment. 3 weeks after Kylie's storm, she came to the shop at closing. She wore sunglasses though the sky was gray and her hands shook. I need help, she said, and set a bag on the counter. Inside was a mess that used to be a life. Overdraft notices, a disconnection warning, a letter from an apartment manager with a font that belongs to bullies, a glossy catalog from the skincare company where success is always one more recruit away. I can't pay rent, she said. I can't ask my mother. I can't ask your son because he says rent comes before restaurants now, and where am I supposed to go if I can't be seen? You can be seen, I said, and pushed the bag back. Just not where you've been looking. I'm not asking you for money, she said, and it was the first sentence she'd ever spoken to me that had no lie in it. I really am asking for help. The kind you like. The kind where I do something. I told her the next tax clinic was Saturday. I told her I had a friend who runs a consignment shop and pays cash for purses and shame. I told her her skincare company was a business model that eats its young. I told her I'd watch Avery 3 nights a week, no commentary, if she got a job and kept it. She stared at me without blinking. You don't even like me, she said. I don't, I said. But I love us. That night she texted, I got a job at the grocery store. Customer service. People are terrible. I replied, people are the point. She lasted. I could end the sentence there, and it would still be a triumph. She lasted. She learned to return items without taking the insult personally. She learned to say no to scams and yes to schedules. She learned that smoothies taste better when you know your electricity will still hum tomorrow. Brett kept paying. He fell off the wagon of responsibility twice, then climbed back on with a face that knows why bruises happen. He took night classes at the community college because a boy at the shop told him it's not that bad for school, and it was the first time his pride took advice from anyone but itself. He learned a trade that has nothing to do with flipping and everything to do with floors that don't squeak. The shop grew. We added a small lending library with books about how to fix things and novels that fix a different kind of leak. We built a tiny stage because a girl said, "Tools are theater, too," and I believed her. We started a little fund called the Waste Basket where people could toss in $5 and we'd toss it at whatever small emergency begged loudest that week. A prescription, a field trip fee, a bus pass, a mother's car seat that had never been properly anchored to anything. On the second anniversary of the shop, the mayor came again with a thicker certificate and a handshake that felt like a thank you rather than a photo op. The local paper wrote a story I clipped and sent to Amos's sister in Idaho because she loves clippings. A man I've never met stopped me in the aisle at the hardware store and said, "My nephew got an apprenticeship because of you." And I said, "No. Because of him." I just held the door. Then came the day Brett made a choice I'd been waiting for as long as I can remember. He apologized without a budget line attached. He stood on my porch with his hat in his hands like a movie where farmers apologize to crops. "I said you'd waste it," he said. "I said I'd invest it." "You invested. You invested in everything I should have loved first." "I invested in us," I said. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not because you bought my house or my debt or because I looked stupid in front of strangers. I'm sorry I tried to make you small so I wouldn't have to grow." I sat down because bones deserve chairs for sacraments. He sat beside me. We watched Avery ride his bike in circles and pretend he was being chased by lasers. "I'm going to be late sometimes," he said. "I'm going to mess up." "So am I said. We made a deal neither of us signed. I would not make his new life harder just to pay back the old one. He would not ask me to make his new life easy just because I could. Kylie came 2 days later with a plant in a pot and 2 coffees that were all milk and hope. "For the porch," she said. "We got a place with a porch, too. It's small, but it holds chairs. I like chairs now." "Sit," I said. She told me about rude customers and good coworkers and the girl she trains who says her hair is goals. She didn't say sorry and I didn't ask for it. Sometimes apologies taste better when they are baked into the cake of how a person behaves now instead of piped in awkward frosting on top. At Christmas, we held a tool drive. People brought hammers and hope with worn handles. I put a card on the donation table with a line in Amos's handwriting that I cut from a grocery list. "Leave the world with more useful things than you took." People signed their names under it like a pledge. Brett volunteered an evening a week at the shop, showing boys and girls how to lift correctly so they'd still love their backs at 50. He knows forklifts the way some men know the sound of their father's laughter, by heart and with gratitude. He doesn't preach. He teaches. He says, "Here's how I messed this up and here's how Mrs. Delgado made me better," and the kids tease him for being old and he laughs and wears it like a coat that fits. Kylie helped at the front desk. She learned the software we use to keep track of tools and donations. She recorded a video about our apprenticeship program that went more viral than anything she'd ever posted about serum. She cried quietly in the storage room when a girl came in to ask about how to get her mother's car back from a tow lot. She handed the girl a card for the waste basket and told her to bring a parent to sign for it. The girl came back with her father, and I watched the way he looked at Kylie like she'd rescued more than a Camry. A year later, a year that contained almost as much ordinary goodness as my first 66 combined, I took the bus to the cemetery with a paper cup of coffee and a folded letter in my purse. I sat on Amos's stone and told him the truth. "I wasted your money," I said. "Most of it. Some's in a trust with Avery's name on it, and it will grow like a plant that actually gets watered. Some paid for roofs and wiring and the way a person's face changes when they realize they can hold a drill. Some bought a house painted blue that now shelters a nurse who leaves bread at my door. Some bought a stack of letters that hold up a wall better than studs. I read him my favorite one. It was from a boy who once fell asleep in my office chair while his sister fixed a toaster. Dear Miss Lorna, it said. I didn't know old people could be cool. I want to be old like you someday. Sincerely, Orlando. I told Amos I bought our son's debt. I told him about forklifts and Mrs. Delgado and donuts. I told him about Kylie learning to love chairs and customer service and our grandson, who now knows the difference between a Phillips and a preacher because one brings things together and the other should. I did all the things you'd have teased me about, I said. I was petty sometimes. I enjoyed it. I learned to say no in a voice that didn't shake. I learned to let people be wrong about me. I learned that being a good steward of the world feels exactly like wasting money if you measure it by what you get to keep. A breeze moved through the cemetery like a choir that forgot its words, but hummed anyway. A crow laughed. Somewhere a child laughed back. I pressed my palm to his name and stood with the creak that announces me as thoroughly as perfume ever could. I walked to the bus stop and shared a bench with a woman who told me, without being asked, that her cousin was getting out of jail and needed a job. I gave her a card. She cried the small, embarrassed cry of someone who is relieved to find a door unlocked. We sat in comfortable silence and looked at our reflections in the bus shelter glass and didn't recognize ourselves in the best way. When I got home, Avery was on my porch doing his homework because his father had taken the truck to night class and their apartment was loud with a neighbor's music. He looked up and waved the way children wave when the person they love has been gone exactly long enough. Super grand, he said. I need help with fractions. I love fractions, I said, which is not true, but love often announces itself in lies we tell to save a child from thinking they are alone with their confusion. We ate peanut butter toast and divided apples and decided that the correct answer to the question was 8, or possibly 3, but definitely not the letter he'd chosen that looked like a chair. Brett came later, tired and happy. He ate the last cookie without asking, then apologized and cut it in half even though it was too late. We pretended to share anyway. Kylie came after her shift with a bouquet of flowers half off because they were one day past their primness, which is when I like them best. We sat under the picture wall, and I told them stories they hadn't earned yet, and they listened like I gave them lit lanterns. When the night grew long and we'd run out of small talk and excuses, Brett leaned back and looked at me the way a son looks when he finally sees the whole of you and not a vending machine in a cardigan. You didn't waste it, he said. I did. Maybe, I said. For a while. He shook his head. You turned waste into work. I turned money into rooms, I said. You filled them. Kylie tucked her legs under her like a girl and said, I'm still mad at you sometimes. Me, too, I said. That's how we know we're being honest. Avery fell asleep with his head in my lap. His breath was warm on my wrist. The house smelled like onions and bread and oil and rain and the faintest lemon from a perfume that now reminds me of effort. Outside, a car drove by with the bass turned low like it had learned not to shout. Somewhere, a crow laughed. I went to the shelf and took down the little folder with the last of the money in it, the part I'd told no one about. I'd kept it for emergencies and for mercy, and because keeping something back is how women like me have always survived. I wrote a check to the shop for a second van. I wrote a check to the lumber yard for a scholarship that will buy tools for anyone who writes me a letter about what they want to build. I wrote a check to the grocery store's employee fund with no note attached because anonymity tastes best in the mouth of pride. I slid the checks into envelopes and set them on the hall table under my keys. I stood in the doorway and watched the 3 people I love most breathe in my living room like it belonged to them because it does. I thought about Brett's line, "You're going to waste this money anyway," and I smiled because he had been right, just not in the way he meant. Here's the list of everything I wasted money on that mattered. A roof for a blue door. A sign with my husband's name. A boys' field trip fee. A stack of crooked letters. Bolt cutters ribbon. Bread. A woman's electricity bill paid in quiet. A forklift certification. A rosebush for a grave. Coffee for a survivor with a story about not drowning. Pizza on a Tuesday with too many hands grabbing slices and nobody counting who took more than their share. A future with somebody else's fingerprints all over it. I fell asleep in Amos's chair and woke to the sound of birds arguing cheerfully over what the morning should do first. I made pancakes. I packed Avery's school lunch. I put on my cardigan with the loose button and didn't fix it because crooked has become my favorite hymn. I drove to the shop with the first envelope and taped it to the office door with blue painter's tape that will peel right off when somebody more organized than me gets to it. On the way home, I took Wren Street for no reason but habit and love. The blue door looked beautiful against the new roof. There were 2 chairs on the porch and a book open on one of them, face down like it had been interrupted by something kind. I thought about all the houses where chairs wait for people to become the versions of themselves that money sometimes promises, but only work delivers. My phone buzzed as I turned onto my street. It was a photo from Brett. He stood in front of a forklift with a certificate in his hand that said he had been tested and found competent. Mrs. Delgado stood beside him, unsmiling, which is how she shows love. On the certificate, in the margin, he'd written a note that made my eyes sting and my laugh arrive at the same time. Thanks for wasting the money, Mom. I like how it looks on us.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video, like and subscribe. Bye bye!